Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a couple of us here that were from before. We got Lisa, the Occult Reject mad scientist. What is going on, Lisa? Thank you very much for joining us again.
How's it going? Good. I'm very happy to be here. I have Thomas back on, and now we're going to talk about the Druid mounds, and so I'm really excited about that. But thank you for having me on, and like to plug the occultresearchinstitute.org, as well as Solis Lisa on Twitter. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we got my man Tyrone joining us again. Thank you very much, sir. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Ready to gain this knowledge from Thomas over here. Everything that you can find from me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. You can also buy my book, Journey Through the Origins of History, on Amazon, which became a bestseller. Thanks for having me, Nick.
No, of course. Thank you.
Tyrone, a good Irish name.
Yeah, I actually have Irish blood in me. I found that out doing a DNA background test on me.
Cool.
Awesome. And Thomas, please. I mean, I know you've been on the show before. I'm sure most people might know who you are already, but for people who don't, can you please let people know who you are and where they can find all your great stuff?
I basically am an author, I guess would be the main thing. I've written a lot of books on everything from ancient sites to psychopathies and mind control to magic and sorcery. I make a lot of films. I've done a lot of speaking tours around the world. I used to be a graphic designer. I've done satire and stand-up comedy, and I'm still fascinated by all that. I still love all that stuff. And these days, I just basically am very much greatly interested in the strangeness of the world and the mysteries of life.
Awesome. Thank you. One thing I did want to ask, just going from some of the stuff that you've put out, I would assume like you are interested in the actual occult too. I'm not saying you practice it, but maybe you study it. Like that was
no, I will practice it too. Just as
all right. I just putting you up.
I have since I was a child,
okay.
And I've got David Conway's book on Magic, a primer. And I did one of the workings in it, and it worked, and it terrified me for about 10 years. And then as you got older, I got involved in chaos magic groups and stuff like that, and Discordia, and started to understand the science behind magic. And it was very beneficial to me in my work in deciphering mind control. And basically, there's a lot of nonsense out there about, a lot of, unfortunately, I'm not knocking anybody's beliefs, comes from a Christian viewpoint, that these people are not well equipped or trained to actually study the occult, because they come in at war with it, basically, and this kind of thing. But yeah, no, absolutely, I've done a lot of stuff. Like, I'm not having a member of a graduate group. I've never worn robes, done anything like that. But I've actually, I've done sigils and workings over the years, and I've done various forms of magical gnosis, and I can tell you for a fact it works and it's real. But the only thing is, unless you're doing it to benefit yourself spiritually, to grow as a person, it's not going to help you.
I agree with that. Thank you very much. I always say, I think magic, if you're doing it right, you're actually working on yourself.
Oh yeah, and it's when you the science of things like quantum theory and retrocausality and all these everything like this is basically shown how this stuff works, especially as we've come to understand, like the work at the Monroe Institute and the Great Gateway process and the whole concept of the nervous system being much more dynamic than we previously believed. It's not so much spooky anymore. It's just another. It's called the art and science for a reason. It's scientific. It's a science, but it's an art because some people are better than others. It's just how it is. Or you can work at it like a muscle.
Yeah, I will agree with that. That is kind of interesting how stuff like even if you were to look at the Gateway Project probably 15 years ago, people would be like, "What? That stuff is crazy." Now people are looking at it. It's like there's something here,
Oh, absolutely. But even back then, the way they sent that famous page, I think it was page 25, was censored out of it. And the CIA knew that stuff was, and DARPA knew that stuff was real. And the thing was, it was officially they were to mock the Monroe Institute, but at the same time they used all the research to prove it. It's funny, even when it comes to magic, you're still dealing with governments and bureaucracy.
Yeah. That's a really good point, right? But I know today we're going to try to talk about like maybe some Druid megaliths, architecture, maybe mounds or some stuff. Oh, before we get to that, that's why I had to ask you about the occult. I'm so sorry. There was a reason why I asked you that. Were you into that and that brought you getting into this other stuff, or was it vice versa? Or like did the occult get you into looking into like megaliths and mounds and weird stuff?
Well, it's weird. I grew up on the north side of Dublin in quite an urban high-rise, like, what you Americans call a project. We were like poor working class family. But I had a bicycle and I used to cycle miles out into the countryside. And Ireland is covered in these things. There's hundreds of thousands of them probably, ranging from stone circles to round towers to what they call fairy forts. And I think, yeah, definitely, some of them have a spiritual power in them. And I think it switched on something on me. I'll tell you how it really happened for me. When we were 11 years old, when I was 11 years old, they took us on a school day trip to Tara. And these are very famous ancient sites in Ireland, and Newgrange, which is one of the oldest buildings on earth. And it was just, I think I can remember that was like, what, it's one of those things when you're a kid, like, the fuck, I never thought about this before, that kind of a thing. And yeah, so I think it started then.
That's awesome. Lucky at such a young age. That's great. So what made you end up starting? I mean, I guess probably where you were. I mean, maybe you had like a Druid influence regardless, but like what made you get kind of like looking into stuff like that with the megaliths and the weirdness?
Well, the Druids have nothing to do with the megaliths. The megaliths are from thousands of years before the Druids. The Druids existed during the time of the Celtic people around Europe about 2,500 years ago. Bronze Age, early Iron Age. The original megaliths, the most incredible ones like Stonehenge, all the ones in Scotland, Malta, all the most famous ones in Europe, they're from about 5,500 years ago, and they were created by a Proto-European race. I have some of their DNA, and maybe some of you guys have it as well. That were the original Europeans, and then the Indo-Europeans came from the east and took the place over. And the Indo-Europeans, thousands of years later, were basically what became the Druids, the Celts, the Teutons, and all that stuff. That's why there's a common linguistic thing. But Druids had nothing to do with the stone circles. It's a huge misunderstanding. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying it's a common misunderstanding. They were built thousands of years before, and there's zero evidence that Druids ever used standing stones or stone circles. They preferred the groves. The woodland groves, the groves in the woods, clearings in the woods to perform their magic and their rituals and so on. But they probably were just as intrigued by the megaliths. Now there could have been some, but there's no evidence of it at all. These things basically fell out of favor in the Bronze Age and just basically were stones in the fields for thousands and thousands of years until antiquarians in the 1700s started to take them very seriously. And they're the ones who used to call them Druids' temples. They would give them names like that, but they're all from thousands of years before the Druids.
Do you think they ever utilized them? Or are you saying no?
What's that?
Do you think they still utilize? You know how like a lot of things, like I think now we're starting to see that maybe people might have repurposed stuff and they actually really did maybe create it. It's actually old. Was.
Yeah. I was reading an Algernon Blackwood story tonight called Ancient Lights, and Crowley and Nyberg, Alistair Crowley and Victor Nyberg, were using a mound in Sussex in the south of England, and they were saying it because it had special powers. There's a famous stone circle, and it's a pretty dark one, called the Rollright Stones in the Cotswolds in England, and this stone circle was studied by the New Scientist magazine in 1982, and they determined that some kind of energy force leaped from the stone to the stone to the stone, and then spiraled out of the world, out of reality, into the middle of the circle, and they just vanished. the energy force just vanished into like nothing. Now, during the 1940s, a farm worker who lived in the local village stumbled upon what he called the local aristocrats performing a satanic ritual in the stone circle. This is what he said now. And he made the mistake of going down to the local pub, and after a few beers saying, I saw Lord this and Lady that, you know, naked and wearing robes and all that. He was found the next day with a pitchfork driven so far through his neck that he was pinned to the ground. So that was like, and even like the British police to this day accept that was an occult murder. And that happened at the Rollright Stone Circle in England. So, and there was also a character, I'm probably the world's expert on him, called John Foster Forbes. And he was a kind of a Scottish antiquarian, kind of like agricultural experimentist, fascinating character. And he died in the early 1950s. And he was way out there at the time, Forbes. And but a lot of stuff that he said has come to we found that it's true. Like the megaliths in Ireland look are the same as the ones in Spain because they were built by the same people. And this is things that people were laughing at, but he got it right, you know. And he used to travel around with this, like something like an English old-time English movie with all these characters, and they would do psychometry on the stones. They would hold the stones, not just only megaliths, but also things like castles and, you know, other ancient sites, abbeys. And there was a woman called Miss Eliza Pixley, the human television set, and she used to hold and get visions and readings of what this was about. But he in his memoirs, and his books are impossible to get nearly because they were only published in like very short runs during World War II because of a paper shortage. I have nearly all of them, and one of them is his memoirs as a child. And on his parents' land in Scotland was a stone circle, and an aristocrat came to visit his father, and they were having lunch together. And the aristocrat was saying, remarking on the stone circle, and John Foster Forbes is a little boy goes, what do they actually do there? And the aristocrat said, oh, they do dastardly little things, and sometimes little boys like you are the sacrifice. And so that was in the 1920s. So, you know, it's I wouldn't be surprised. Years ago in Ireland, when I was a teenager, I was up in the mountains near Dublin with my friends doing drugs and getting drunk and listening to like metal. And we went into this car park near this forest park area, and I was so out of it. Like, I mean, I've been on speed for like 3 days, and you know, when you're 18, you can like basically you can handle anything, you know. And I didn't drink alcohol at all. I wasn't a person who drank alcohol, but I used to like speed and things like that and LSD. And so I started drinking cans of beer, and I got drunk very, very quickly because I hadn't been asleep for 3 days. And then all of a sudden, my friend Jerry goes, "Fuck, Tomo! And there was all these people in robes in the car park coming from where a megalith was, and the one of them in the middle pointing at us like this. Now, I don't know if it was teenagers or students having a laugh, but my God, I had to change my trousers when I got home that night. We just like got onto the car and just belt down. So that, I don't know if that was real or if that was someone having a laugh, you know, but my God, I was, because you know, when you're awake for nearly 3 days and you've had like a can of beer that's like completely gone to your head, oh yeah, it was, and the you know, the fear just went boom. But maybe that was one. I don't know, or it could, or was, you know. But there is a place up in those mountains in Dublin called the Hellfire Club, which is quite notorious. It was an aristocratic site that's built on top of a megalith, and they actually sacrificed humans and all kinds of things, the local aristocrats. So who knows? You know, there's evidence, but it's hard to prove it. You know.
That is wild. Do you know any other interesting, like weird, strange, or weird high strangeness sites that you've either like researched or been to?
no end to it. My God, I've had like.
All right, tell us some more.
I was in Sardinia with Maria Wheatley, who's a very well-known individual in that scene, the Megaliths, a good friend of mine, about 10 years ago. And we were making a documentary. I was in a documentary on Megaliths, and she and I were the stars of the show. We were they were taking, it was great. They were taking us around Europe, put us in nice hotels and everything. It's like, it's like, I felt like I actually had a real job for once. And we were filming at this site in Sardinia, way up in the mountains, and like literally in the middle of nowhere. And Sardinia has incredible megaliths and thousands of them. And I did my bit for the camera, like blah blah blah. This site, this is what that means. Blah blah. This is so similar. These are so similar to the megaliths in Ireland and Britain. Blah blah blah. The usual thing, right? And then she did her bit for the camera. And on the entrance, the portal entrance to the megalithic tomb site, wherever the thing was, Neuragics they're called, there was a bull skull and its horns, and the horns had fallen on the ground. And I was saying, and I picked up the bull horns, and I just showed them to like the guy who was the producer of the documentary team. And I said, oh, you know what? This is what's been going on up here. And I put them on the megalith next to the skull. And then I sat back in the back I went to the back of the tomb. And I'm sitting there like that while Maria is doing her piece for the camera. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh, it's really pretty here. I can hear the birds singing and, little lizards running around and all the lovely insects and the flowers and everything. And then suddenly it felt like someone had drilled a hole in the end of my foot, and my entire life energy was spilling out like a leak. That's the only way I could describe it. And I started going down like this, like rolling down. And they looked at me and he said my face was pale white. And I said, what? And I said, are you all right, Thomas? I think it was food poisoning or something. And I said, no, something's been done to me. Get me out of here ASAP. Now, we were on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. We're not even roads. We had to hike there. And I was literally barely able to stand from whatever this thing had attacked me. And we got down the hill somehow, and we'd gotten into this field by climbing over a farmer's wall that came up to here on us, right? A dry stone wall that came up about here on us, right? And Mary and the other crew got over, and I said, guys, I can't do it. I've no energy. I can't do it. And there was a huge bull behind me in the field. And it was starting to, the steam coming out of its mouth. It was winter or whatever it was. It was like a cold spring morning. And I literally walked through the wall like that. I pushed the entire stone wall over, and it nearly fell on top of them because it was a dry stone wall. But it was the last strength in my body. And when I got home back to the hotel room, I couldn't describe what the sensation was like. Felt like my soul was being stolen from me. I got room service to buy me 3 large bags of sea salt from the store across the street, and I got into the freezing cold bath with the salt, and I was fine. I was fine after about half an hour. But that was like the most terrifying experience I've ever had. That I can definitely say was spiritual. So obviously I had offended something. And then I got down, and then the next day we're in the same area, and I went to this cafe, and it was just like a really gorgeous Italian girl behind the counter. And I can speak a little bit of Italian. And she was like, I love your accent and all this kind of thing, right? And I was like, it was really fun. And then I said to her, something really weird happened up there. And she goes, oh, magic negro, black magic that goes on up there. So there was definitely something going on up there.
Oh, wow. She ain't even heard about it.
Interesting.
What about did you know anything like any kind of like sites that had like like stones or stuff like that, or like a megaliths that you've been to that have like giving you a weird feeling, or you have an experience that?
Yeah, sometimes they have weird sound effects. Stonehenge is that. A friend of mine, Mick is English, who told me that before Stonehenge became a tourist site, well, official tourist site with like a gate, and you pay a fare and you pay money, and you could just go there. But it's on a military base. Like a lot of these places are on military bases for some reason. And he was in the army, in the British Army at the time, and he said that him and his friends could stand on either side of Stonehenge with their backs to a stone, and they could talk at a very like a whisper, and their friend could hear them as clear as anything on the other side of the stone circle. Like it amplified the sound or through the sound or something like that. And so when I was at Stone, I was with on that same documentary team. I was lucky enough to be in Stonehenge, and when the sun rose over Salisbury Plain, they wanted to shot the sun rising, and me and her in the circle, which was, you know, it cost thousands to do that, and they were paying for it, so it was a once in a lifetime thing for me. And that's why they went bankrupt and the film was never made. But those stones were very, the feeling, I could find it hard to believe, like explain. The first time I ever saw Stonehenge was from a distance, and there was a strange, I just don't know. I mean, I know it's a touristy spot now, but if you go there when it's not a touristy spot, or when it's closed in the evening, there used to be an old side road you could go down, and a lot of hippies would camp there along there, that kind of thing, you know. But you could actually get into the field next to it and get real. And I can remember the first time I saw it with the sun going at like twilight, and I was like, oh my God, it totally lives up to its reputation as something magical. You know, it does. It totally does. But of course, like everything else these days, it's a tourist site, and they bust in tourists and all that stuff. But I was very, very fortunate the first time to see it. Was like basically trying to break into the site. But yeah, I mean, you'll often have stones that will have strange, others, a weird sometimes a weird fluctuation. There's an island on the lake here called Boa Island in Northern Ireland, just over the border. I live in the Republic of Ireland, and just over the border in the lake in County Fermanagh, next to Tyrone, is there's a lake with an island on it, and it has this ancient statue. No one knows how old it is, of what's called the Boa Island idol, and it looks like a miniature version of the, you know, it's the Easter Island statues, the Moai. You know those Easter Island statues? It's like a miniature version of that on the other side of the world. And I was with some friends there a few times, and it was a dull day. You have to go on a dull day. You don't see it when the sun is shining, but you will see the trees behind the stone above its head shimmering, as if some kind of we'll talk about the energies. There's definitely energies involved in this, shimmering and coming off the top of the stones. I cover this all in my books, like the Druid Code and Sorcery, the Invocation of Strangers, and the Mysterious Round Towers of Ireland. But anyway, this energy comes off. Now, the energy force itself, there's two types. There's paramagnetic energy and there's diamagnetic energy. And they are basically, like, they excite the layers in quartz crystals, which are like, you know, quartz vibrates. You know, we all know that, like quartz vibrates, right? In the stones, a lot of them have quartz, right? And it seems to vibrate these quartz things. Now, the ancients lived in a time when there was no light pollution, radio noise, nothing, you know. It was just them in nature. So they would have been very attuned to it in the ways that we're not. Now, another character, another genius, a real genius, was an American scientist, and I can't believe I forgot his name. He wrote a book called, I hate when this happens, called The Magnetic Life of Agriculture. And he was an American soldier based in Ireland in World War II. Philip S. Callahan, that was his name, Philip S. Callahan. And he was based in Ireland during World War II, and he was an electronics engineer. And his job was to basically develop the radio system for the submarines on D-Day, the D-Day invasion. And he was an electronics genius. And when D-Day happened, he was in Ireland with nothing to do, right? Nothing to do, just basically go to the pub and hang out at the base. So him and his friends started exploring the ancient sites of Ireland, just, you know, as a touristy thing, you know. the old stone circles and the very famous round towers. And he brought all his crazy, you know, it's probably from Roswell when you think about the equipment or somewhere like that, you know, that he brought with him. And he started to do readings on the stones, in scientific readings. And he determined that they can pull an energy out of the air called diamagnetic energy. And it's transferred into the soil. And this is why, and any Irish farmer will tell you this, that sheep and cows prefer to eat around the bottom of the round towers or some of the standing stones or stone circles if they haven't been messed with. Because the diamagnetic energy produces more healthy grass for them to graze on, and the animals as a result are more healthy. So that's a big clue that these people understood energy in a very different way than we do. You know, we know about electromagnetic energy and, you know, how the transmission of electrons and stuff like that. But they had it was a Stone Age technology, but it was a different technology, but it was still technology. And it continued on, it lasted in Ireland for a hell of a long time. I mean, they were still using there's still something like 100 round towers still standing in Ireland. And when they were built in the late Iron Age, I believe, my investigation believes that they were built during the time of the Romans, and they used Roman technology in Ireland to build them. They must have got it from England or something, the Romans in England, but Britain at the time. And to this day, farmers will tell you that they will bring their cows and sheep over to the round towers to graze on the grass because they're less likely to get sick and digestive problems, and they grow fat and healthier. And the stone and so that you're talking about a technology that was used from possibly 5,500 BC to maybe the Middle Ages. So you're talking about like 5,000 years of the same technology, and we think we're hot shit with like 150 years of electricity. You know,
that is interesting.
Yeah, like
go ahead.
Yeah, they had the Baghdad battery back then.
Well, that was proper electromagnetic energy. But again, like what the problem is, a lot of the ancient sites have been tampered with and damaged over the years. You know, even like Stonehenge, stones have fallen down, and for insurance reasons, they put them up with cement. This kind of shit went on, you know. So when you find the ones like the one in Sardinia that was on top of the mountain that's never been touched, they still have powers and energies in them.
As well. I was going to ask you something and I lost it looking at the chat. Lisa, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, just that you hear. I'm so glad that you brought up the whole druid and then the megaliths and stuff, because I had no idea. I thought they were used, and so I'm glad that you said that, because I was under the same misconception as well. But
it's very common. It's very common. I don't feel bad about that. And there's also in my book, The Druid Code, I theorized that there was a proto-shamanic tradition that probably existed at the time of the megaliths, that the Druids of the Celtic era may have continued, and in fact may have continued on with the Freemasons, because Thomas Paine, the man who wrote the book Common Sense and came up with the term United States of America, he wrote a phenomenal book on Freemasonry, on the history of Freemasonry. It's hard to get, but he said that the Freemasons came from the Druids of Ireland, Scotland, and Italy. That's what he said.
Oh, interesting. That's a very interesting angle. I had never heard of that one. So that's very interesting.
The Druids existed in Ireland until about the Renaissance. They were called the Fila, and they were actually in the employment of kings. And they were Ireland had its own legal system called the Breton Code, and they were not allowed to practice pagan religion. So they were secular Druids, but they were Druids in every single way, except they were not allowed to practice paganism. But they were kept in the courts of the Irish kings until the end of the Gaelic kingdoms, which was 1610, I think. And Queen Elizabeth the first became Queen of Ireland.
And that's right about where Rosicrucian, kind of the manifestos come about,
And
the
exactly,
1600s, right?
exactly the same time. And what happened to those Irish nobles? They went to France and Spain and Italy, and they opened colleges, and they took these proto-druids, the Philo, with them. And the next thing I know, you have Freemasons. So Thomas Paine's theory makes a hell of a lot of sense.
That's interesting. I had no, and I always wonder about that connection, because you hear about, all of a sudden it just kind of pops out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden it not goes underground, but you hear these murmurings, and then you see it kind of upcropping in France and Italy, but you think,
Yeah.
well, did they just grab the book and decide to start their own organization, or, did you have like a resurgence of it? That makes sense. That would make a lot of sense.
In fact, in Ireland, there are ruins of Masonic temples. Some unbelievable ones that look like something out of a movie on top of megaliths, as if to say, we continue. This is the continuation. And they're in Scotland too. And in England, they tended to build churches on top of the ancient sites. So all those very old English churches, the Saxon churches, a lot of them are built on ancient pagan sites.
Isn't
But it
that
seems to
true
be
of
very
Spain as well?
English. What's that?
Isn't that true of Spain as well? They had the same tradition of building churches on top of mounds or on
Yep.
high points.
In Spain and in Portugal. In Portugal, they've actually been in churches that were built from megaliths, and they've done it in a lot of the Mediterranean. But they did it in Mexico and places like that too. And they got ancient like Aztec sites and built churches on top of it. And a lot of the Native American stuff, and they went to Africa and they found sites and built on churches on top of them as well. It's like this Abrahamic thing went, boom, we own this now. So a lot of that kind of went on, everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah.
There was a Pope Boniface, I think it was. He wrote a famous letter to the Anglo-Saxons in the 6th century, and it was to the bishops of Britain and Ireland. And he said, do not destroy the temples of the pagans, for they are very well built. Remove only the unclean idols and sprinkle them with holy water. But leave the temples standing, because they are well built and the locals are familiar with them. And eventually they will come to the one true God. So the Christians, and particularly the Catholics, were very clever at taking paganism and slowly, even in Ireland, no one really knows when paganism ended and Christianity began. It wasn't just like something that happened in a quick time. The history, a lot of its lies are all. There's lots of books deliberately hidden over here. The Royal Irish Academy has something like 900 books of ancient Irish history that they're refusing to translate. They say they don't have the resources. They're millionaires. They're deliberately not letting them out.
Come on.
I would say that is also the case, at least with the Hispanic culture, at least with the Mexican culture, in that. So I was raised Catholic. Obviously, I'm Hispanic Mexican descent. And you don't know where paganism ends and Catholicism starts. And I think
It's
it was
the same.
part of the assimilation.
Yeah, I'm a pagan myself. I'm a pagan myself, and I always say to people, if you're going to be a Christian, be a Catholic, because it's literally paganism, especially your tradition with the Santa Muerte and the whole. In fact, I when I was in Sri Lanka, I was talking to some Hindu gurus there, and they were saying, "What religion were you?" I told them I'm pagan, and they were like, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of like European Hinduism, which it kind of is. It comes from the same root, Indo-European." And I said, "But I was raised." He says, "Yeah, but you're from Ireland. You're probably a Catholic or a Protestant. Which were you?" And I says, "No, I was raised Roman Catholic. I did my first Holy Communion and all that stuff, And they said, because he said to me, Hindus consider Roman Catholics to be like another form of Hindus. The way you venerate all the saints is exactly the same way the Hindus venerate all the gods and goddesses." And I just stepped back and go, "My God, he's right. He's absolutely right." You never think about it that way. Yep. But all they did was they transferred it. Like a lot of the famous saints are actually pagans gods and goddesses, like Ireland's Saint Breed. She was the goddess Breed, pagan goddess Breed. They just gave her a new name, but it's the same goddess, and that happened all over the world.
Agreed.
But I'm fascinated by when I lived in America. That's one of my, and I had loads of like Hispanic friends, but it was one of my great regrets that I never got to understand that sort of like proto-paganism within Hispanic Catholicism, because I'm absolutely fascinated by it now.
You know, and I will say we did a bit on the apparition of the Guadalupe Virgin Mary. And with some of the lore behind that, it ties back into some of the visions that they got of the Virgin Mary in Spain, and they brought that over as well. But also, you had the people there, Aztecs or Mexica, that worshipped their gods as well, and they worshipped them on mounds or high points. And one of the churches was built on a high point of one of the goddesses. Initially, when I guess the vision came to an Aztec person, was telling him to tell the bishop, hey, I want you to build on top of this mound. The bishop initially thought, no, we're not rebuilding any kind of site to their gods. And they're like, no, it's a Catholic one. Anyway, long story short, they end up building it on a high point. But most of these areas with the pre-Hispanic or pre-Columbian culture, it's the same. Like what you're talking about, they have all of these deities, all of these, I guess you could say saints, or the Hall of Famers. That's what I call them. The Hall of Famers, the people that made it into the Hall of Fame, and we're all, kind of hoping to get to that point. That they basically say these are the people that are responsible for X, Y, and Z. And I would say it's similar to the Hindu, if not Catholic, the way that we kind of hierarchically place our Hall of Famers.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to Hindu temples, and it's just like, it's almost like a Catholic church with loads of saints in them. And instead of just like, say, one god, or one statue of the Virgin Mary. I'm fascinated by Marian apparitions. That's a phenomenal subject that doesn't get enough interest. And if you look at the areas where you've had Marian apparitions, like the famous ones, like Guadalajara in Spain, Fatima in Portugal, the granddaddy of them all, Medjugorje in Bosnia, and Ballinspittle in Ireland, they were all in places where there was limestone caves. There was traditions of fairies or jinns or that kind of thing. And they were always areas were known for strange lights and everything. And so, the Fatima apparition is like the most incredible paranormal story in history. And yet the official story is just that Mary appeared to these children. And the sun danced in the sky, but it was much more incredible than that.
Yeah, and even some of what tangentially, just not to get off topic or anything, but even the people that experience the apparitions, the fact that most of their bodies are incorruptible, they have not decayed.
Like Saint Bernadette and Lourdes. Yeah, Saint Bernadette and Lourdes, and that was all that was limestone as well, limestone caves. Yeah, her body is it's perfect. Like, she looks like a young girl.
Yep.
It's amazing. Yep. But and there's blasts of radiation and all kinds of weird. It ties in very much with the UFO stuff. Big time.
Yep.
Jacques Vallée. Have y'all ever heard the author or the nun Mary of Agreda? She wrote the book City of God about Mary. Yeah, no. She had visions from Mary specifically. I get it in a second. I have it in my library, but it's like an 8-part book set that talks specifically about the Virgin Mary and everything about her, basically.
What country did it happen in?
Spain, I believe it was. I'm about to go grab it real quick just to double check, because I have the set right now.
Yeah. There's a whole interesting, like, what happened in Fatima is hard to believe. When you Jacques Vallée in his book Passport to Magonia, I think it is, gives a full description of the things that happened, and it's like this 3-foot being appeared in the trees that was rotating and making electronic noises, and just like weird. And then there was UFOs seen all over the place, and just bizarre stuff. And then the Catholic Church moved in and took control of the narrative and said it was the Blessed Virgin who appeared. 2 of the children died shortly after, and one was locked in a convent for the rest of her life.
That's insane. I question a lot of there are probably way more apparitions and they have to be sanctioned or checked off by saying yes, this is. But I'm wondering how much are still being reviewed and will forever be reviewed and never be released out into.
I know someone who saw a Marian apparition. I mean, it's a mad story, and he was an atheist. And there was a famous thing in Ireland in the mid-80s called the moving statues, and statues of the Virgin Mary in this one place was starting to move, and people were gathering and watching it. And he went down. He was an atheist and a police detective. He's dead now. I used to go fishing and watercolor painting with him. He was a mate of mine, and he was a hard-nosed atheist. And he went down there just out of curiosity. And he said to me, Thomas, the statue moved. And I said, what do you mean it moved? It like shimmer. He goes, no, its head turned like this. Its arms went up and down. And I went up to it and touched it, and it was the statue. And I said, okay, you're an atheist. Thanks, Tyrone. So it is Spain.
Yeah, it was Spain. She was the daughter of Francis Coronel and Catherine Arana, born in April 2nd, 1602. In a small town of Agreda near Tarazona in Spain.
There you go. Then I'm going to check that one.
It's a really good book. It talks everything. She basically wrote these from her visions from the Virgin Mary herself. I mean, it's very interesting. It's an 8-part book set, but it comes in 4 books instead.
Cheers for the heads up on that, Tyrone. I'm definitely going to check that out. But yeah, my friend, I asked him, how could you say that there's no such thing as the paranormal? And he went, Thomas, it was just a mass hallucination. That's all. Like that's how he rationalized it, you know?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was like he couldn't go there. He couldn't go any further.
You know, I know that there's in Spain there, and I can't remember off the top because we did a review of some of these like ancient occultists and some of the grimoires and all this stuff kind of tied to Spain, how you're having this conglomeration in Spain around the 1100s of you're having like the
Moorish Enchantadas.
Yes, everybody was talking. Most of the text, most of the grimoires come out during this period because they're all talking to each other and whatnot. But there's also a lore. Do what?
It's from Moorish Spain. When the Moors went into Spain, they brought a lot of the original Greek magical texts that were lost when the Christians basically destroyed the Roman Empire, and they held on to them, and they brought them back into Europe, into places like Cordoba in Spain. And I cover it in detail in my book Sorcery. Pope Sylvester I was an occultist originally called Gilbert, who stole in a book of Islamic magic, and he became Pope. And he created a talking robot in the Vatican, and he was ripped to pieces on an altar in the Vatican by a demon in front of his congregation. And that's like in the Vatican Ark. It was the year 1000 AD. Pope Sylvester, his real name was Gilbert, and he'd stolen books from the Moorish occultists, and that's all like documented. It's not even hidden.
You said it was Pope Sylvester. I'm going to look that up right now.
Yeah.
It was Albertus Magnus's android that got him. That's wild. Man, yeah, you blew my mind with that shit. You said a robot or some shit.
Yeah, he made a metal head, an automaton that could answer questions. It was like a Picatrix, you know, like you get the head of a demon, you get the head of a person you killed in war or dug them up out of the ground, and you put a demon into their head and they start telling you about the future and the past. He did it with a mechanical head.
Wasn't the concept with using with the Freemasonries using the supposed head of John the Baptist, in that they were asking him questions, or supposedly that was what the lore says?
Well, that's what they said, that it was I think it was the Knights Templar, wasn't it? When they were in the Holy Land, they were accused of the papacy had accused them of invoking a spirit called Baphomet, which we still don't know what Baphomet is, or what. It's still a mystery. Using they claim some of them, these poor bastards were badly tortured. So you can say anything when you're being tortured, you know, when a red hot poker is being shoved up you. But so we don't know how true it is. But you know, you didn't want to get on the wrong side of the Inquisition, especially if you were a Templar. So we don't know what's true and what's not. But they did say that they had the head of John the Baptist that they found under the Temple Mount, and they used that as a picatrix. Gotcha. How true it is, we'll never really know.
Right. Yeah. Apparently that whole lore continues on, that they have the head stored in the Hagia Sophia. I don't know. Again, don't know how any of true that is either.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the Cathar country, and that the Knights Templar wanted to originally build their kingdom there after they came back from Jerusalem, and that's why the Albanese Crusade happened, and the Pope killed 1.5 million of these Cathars in that area. But I've been there myself, and it's you do get the impression that there's some weird stuff that's still going on there. You know, even the whole Holy Blood, Holy Grail, Da Vinci Code stuff. There's a lot of bullshit about that, but at the core of it is something very real. But a lot of Da Vinci Code stuff and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, a lot of it's deception. I wrote a book about that as well too. A colleague of mine called Neil MacDonald, and it's about Saunier Bergenet, who was the priest that ran the chateau. And basically, we give a magical approach rather than a sort of a Christian or a Templar one into his discoveries.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. That sounds really interesting. Wow.
Is there any other kind of sites that you had self experiences at, or that you visited that you might want to mention? You know, it was something that I didn't want to get too specific on it, but was there any other ones that you knew might have been specifically utilized for ritualistic stuff?
You see, I hear stories, but I need, I'm just trying to think. There's been so many. Yeah, in all places, Sri Lanka, there was something called Imma Pakora. It was an ancient megalithic site in the jungle, and I was visiting there a few years ago, and the guide brought me up with a machine gun because the war hadn't been long over. And I said, there's still trouble up here, and he goes, no, this is for the tigers, the crocodile, this is for the tigers to see the crocodiles and the cobras in case they show up. So this place was amazing. It was in the jungle, and it was one of these. It was oh my god! I was climbing up through the jungle on these giant staircases that were made of solid stone, and bridges that had been carved out of things. And at the very top, the views were just incredible. It was like a sky temple. You got that impression. And I said, well, the Buddhists were using it. He said to me, the Buddhists used it. But I said, who used it before the Buddhists? And he went, oh, devil worshippers. So the Buddhists have the same attitude towards their megaliths that the Christians have, that they were used for demon worship and devils before Christians took them over. They just turned a lot of pagan gods into saints, but they turned lots of the other ones into devils, like Pan with his horns. That's the devil, and his cloven hoof, that kind of thing. But yeah, I've had strange experiences in locations as well that had turned out in groves of Sintra in Portugal, which was a grove dedicated to the goddess Diana in Roman times. But but there was also Celtic things there, and there's megaliths there going back to ancient thousands of years before that. And just the sensation of being in those hills there, there's not many megaliths. There's a Moorish castle and a few things like that, but you feel this weird energy that is it's hard to explain. And there's been places in America that I felt that as well, like the Hudson Valley in New York, and in the Appalachians, the Smoky Mountains, in parts of the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, I felt that. And there's along the Appalachia, especially in America, there's a lot of kind of haunted landscapes, big time haunted landscapes, from New England all the way down to Georgia.
And then the limestone, we were talking about limestone and the Marian apparitions. The Appalachia is predominantly made up of that Appalachian crystal.
and it's the same mountain range that travels from Norway through Scotland, through Ireland, under the Atlantic, and then comes into. It's the same mountain range. It goes under the Atlantic and resurfaces again in Maine.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I didn't know that. Damn. That is weird.
I
You
was
think
gonna-
those could be, go ahead. I was wondering if, like, if mountains, if like kind of what you were getting at with those peaks before. I think in the early episode where you can insert stuff to, like, you know, change the energy or whatever. I was just wondering if like a mountain's like kind of showing you that happening there.
Yeah, like you make your wonders if they emulated pyramids. Like that pyramid in Bosnia seems to have been a mountain that they actually carved to look like a pyramid rather than a pyramid they'd made from scratch. So it's almost like, you know, again, these ancient people, they knew stuff, you know, they could sense things and energies, and they worked with it, you know, like Glastonbury in England, the Tor there, the hill, you know, that all the legends and ancient stuff, like King Arthur and all that stuff. But that goes back a much more ancient history, you know, that went back to Saxon and Celtic, and then you know, ancient Britain times.
What places? You mentioned some places in Georgia. My boy Tyrone's over there. So what's some places over there that you could think of?
In Georgia, I don't remember, just being in the mountains. I just remember hiking in the mountains. I can't remember any specific sites.
Okay.
I was living in Atlanta for a while, but I went to the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, and that was all around that area. You know, like those around Pigeon Forge, those mountains behind Pigeon Forge, and all that area there. Man, you know, that's something in that landscape. It's powerful. You can feel the ancient, like the Native American energies in there, and also in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. My God, big time. You know, around like
Georgia.
Around. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say Georgia has a lot of history. Savannah is where I'm closer to. Has a lot of history there. A lot history, actually. It's one of the smallest churches are here in Georgia, just like 30, 40 minutes from where I'm at. There's a lot of occult stuff happening here, a lot of paranormal stuff that happens here. There's a lot of history, period. It's amazing because
a lot of American cities are built where mounds and megaliths were clustered.
Yeah.
Chicago is one, Detroit is another, and all of New England. And a lot of the mounds were destroyed. But if you go to the old maps, they called them Indian mounds, but we don't know who really built them. When I was in Maine, about 5 years ago, and this is a mind-blowing thing. They, up near Bucksport, which is up in northern Maine, they discovered the red paint people had been there. Now, the red paint people were the same people who had built Stonehenge. How and what the hell did they get into Maine from England from? But they were the same people. So, and you know, New England is covered in megaliths, stone circles. There's famous ones like Sentinel Hill, which is in western Massachusetts, which features in the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Dunwich Horror. He gives it a different name. It's in a town called Heath, but it's a stone. It's a British or Irish stone circle on top of a mountain, on top of a hill. And it's very restricted access to it. The farmer doesn't like anyone going in. It's mind-blowing. And there's like dolmens and everything along the east coast of America. In fact, there's a whole growing interest in megaliths on the east coast of America, really taking off big time now, because there was no cities built on them. So they weren't destroyed like the ones in Chicago or Savannah or in Detroit.
You know what I thought was really wild and weird, and I was like, I wonder if there's something with this, or maybe there isn't. But I was up, I can't remember where it was now. It might have been like Maine, New Hampshire. I was going to see Ron, this guy Ron I know from podcasting. We were going to do some like ghost hunting stuff at like a place that he knew, and I was driving through there, and I kind of noticed like you get like a lot of stone walls. And then when I got over like to like where I was going to meet him, like he was like showing me how to get a graveyard on his site, and then like all like these huge stone walls that were like used as like dividers for property. And I was like, oh, there's a lot of these things over here. And then I wanted to send my drone up to get like some effect to like go over the like the cemetery I was looking at. And when I put it up all the way up in the air for a while, just to get like a view of where I was, and I was looking down, I was like, yo, this shit's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, it just
Yeah.
looks like, I'm like, what the? I'm like, was this here? Did people just add on to it? I was just like really weird. And I was like, is there something with this too? I just wondered about that. How
Yeah,
it's all over.
There's a lad in New York, in Yonkers. His name is Manny Grossman, and he had his channel. We used to do kind of like detective stories, but now he's gotten really into megaliths, and he did a lot of things on the Son of Sam and all that stuff. But he's a really cool guy. But he's doing a lot on the megaliths up in upstate New York, and some of the stuff he's filmed is like, that's definitely an ancient site. It's not a root cellar. It's, you know, aligned with the sun. It's aligned with the solstices and everything, you know, like the telltale symbol of these things being actual ritual sites. So who built them? Who knows? You know, it's a real mystery. They're definitely, you know, there have been, you know, lots of. Have you ever heard of Irish Ogham script? It's a type of lettering very similar to the runes that's been found on stones in like Vermont. How the hell did it get there? You know, and there's also a famous stone in Massachusetts, in Bridgewater, that has all these hieroglyphs on it that no one's ever been able to decipher. So America is full of megaliths. It's just that there hasn't been any serious effort.
I think we're losing you. Oh boy.
Did he go mute on you guys too? Yeah.
Yeah. I think he glitched out.
It seemed, yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe he'll come back. Yeah, I even remember when I was looking at those like stone walls.
We're back.
Oh wait, he's coming back. I don't see no video.
Good signal.
Hey,
Can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can hear you a little bit, but we can't see you. That's funny. What happened? Yeah, it is weird. I can hear you though. I just can't see you at all. Like it's a totally blank square.
Yeah, it is. But we can hear you though.
Yeah.
Or not.
Maybe you can't hear us.
I'm going to restart this page.
Okay, there we go. All right, so while he's doing that, what I was going to say is, oh, wait, there he's back. Now he's going to restart it, and it's totally fine. There we go. Those walls even had gigantic pieces of stone that I was just like, yo, how did you even move? Like me and Rory were like, yo, some of these pieces are so huge. Like, how many? I mean, I understand if these are old. I mean, what did you have back to do? What did you have to do back in the day? You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have a computer. If you got 5 kids, I guess you can move that stone. But like I don't know. It was just like, this must have been like a long process. And like a real
they
pain.
etched them in place. You know what I mean? Like that stone was there before, and then they like shaped it and just molded in place. Shape, you know what I mean? I don't.
Oh yeah. No. I don't know what happened with Thomas here.
It's very interesting. I had no idea about the whole with the Virgin Mary being associated with all those sites, as well as pre-opting those sites prior to, like, you know, that there was activity there was paranormal activity there, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see some of these apparitions, and then I mean, I don't know. I mean, that the Vatican would come in and say, no, it was a Marian apparition. That's, I've never heard of that angle before. That would be very, very interesting to explore for sure.
You know, it's always weird. We covered that on, me and Teresa covered that on Spiritual Gangsters. I think that with the 2 girls that were like having these visions.
Yes, that's right.
And I remember when I was like covering this story, I said I was like torn. And first off, there was a lot of just grandiose claims that you had to like take as, you know, you're gonna have to decide if you want to believe that or not. But like when I was like looking at it, and a lot of the numerology or just like certain names. A lot of things I was like, for some reason, like it seemed like everything numerically, like with occult symbolism, it matched what was supposed to be going on, which weirded me out more because I was like, so is it not real? And they're using occult ideas to come up with a story to tell. So like when he said that they might have been using that to cover up something, I was like, oh, that actually makes sense. Because like basically what I'm getting at is they might have used Kabbalistic ideas to come up with this fucking Marian apparition. It may not have been real and was trying to cover up something else. That's why I saw so much in there.
I'll give a little bit of counter. I'll play devil's advocate role here. So obviously growing up I was Catholic, or I was raised Catholic. And I very much adhere to Marian influence, Marian apparitions. Only I wonder how much of it is because of my Hispanic heritage, in that we're a very matriarchal type culture, and so it, you hear about a woman loving, being your go-to between you and God, and that kind of was the case in my family. Like if I wanted to go somewhere, I couldn't ask my dad. I'd ask my mom, and like, hey mom, like, can you talk to him for me? Let him see if he can let me go. So I adhered to that. And so when I think of these Marian apparitions, I very much am like, yeah, that's my filter, and I see it through that. But when Thomas is talking about how they have had paranormal activities in these areas, it makes sense. I had not heard of that. I am definitely wanting to look into it that way, because maybe it is like what you're saying, Nick, with some of these numerology or whatever. What if it reverberates and you're getting the signal from that? And that's why they're kind of positioning these things in these areas. I don't know. Again, look at it through so many different lenses.
Well, every culture. I have to wrap up soon. There's a thunderstorm out here that's playing havoc with the. But there's ancient. Every culture believes that there's earth energies, right? There's no culture that doesn't believe it. That there's something comes out of the earth. There we go. Gone off again.
Yeah, you know what? If you can, I bet you if you turned off your camera, it would be fine if you don't mind, because we're gonna wrap it up soon anyway. Yeah, the audio will probably. No, camera. Can you?
Can you get me back another time, because I got some animals outside. I want to put them inside because of the storm. I don't want. So, can we pick this up another time when the weather's better and a better signal?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna. You told me you're only an hour anyway, so I was gonna say we can wrap it up anyway. That's totally fine with me.
That was a very fast hour. I think I squeezed in a fair bit of info, but
sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was fun. Let me bring me back again. In a month or so, we can do. And we can pick up on this again.
Sure. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find your stuff again? Mention some of the books.
Yeah, the books are available on Amazon, or Luna is a good site to get them, because they'll ship faster to the United States. There's just like Thomas Sheridan, author, and you'll find all my books from psychopathy to mind control to the Third Reich, to the history occult of the Third Reich, to megaliths and sorcery. So. Yeah, I mean, and I have a Substack, Thomas Sheridan, a Substack, and I've got like a YouTube channel. I just did an interesting video today on the comparison between the runes and the Om in terms of magical protection. That's on the Thomas Sheridan Arts channel on YouTube. We'll check that one out.
That is awesome. Nice. That's impressive, sir. Yeah. And Tyrone, do you want to remind everybody where they can find all your stuff, please?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the information. I can't wait to see and hear what you have for next time. Everything that you want to find on me can be on rebirthoftheword.com. And you can get my book, Journey Through the Origins of History, on Amazon. Thanks, Nick.
Of course. Thank you, sir. And Lisa, the Occult Reject Men Scientist, please.
Thomas, as always, this was amazing. Every topic, you always bring the fire, for sure. Can't wait to the next one. And if you want to catch occultresearchinstitute.org for some of our content, and so Lisa on Twitter. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And again, Thomas, I appreciate you squeezing us in today. And yeah, that is another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.